Hey guys, this is the last episode of the Jets 2021-2022 season recap. In this episode, we're going to be going over the player and team stats and where we finished ranking-wise, and then we're going to be going over the player grades for positions. Now, to start off, Zack Wilson finished with 2,334 yards with a 55.6 completion percentage. His accuracy was a major issue. It felt like this season. He finished with 9 total touchdowns, 11 interceptions, was sacked 44 times, and finished with the rating of 69.7. Nice. Most of Zack Wilson's turnovers did come in the first 5 games. He had 9 turnovers in the first 5 games, but in the last 5 games, he finished with 0 interceptions, which he got better. He got a lot better as the year went on. Hopefully, we'll see that trend in 2022-2023 season. Mike White, 4 games, 3 of them were started. He had a 66.7 completion percentage, 953 yards, 7.2 in average. He had 5 touchdowns in the air and then 8 interceptions. Now, 4 of those came against the Buffalo Bills, and he did have that one magical game against the Bengals. And Joe Flacco finished with 3 touchdowns. He finished with the best rating with 113. Josh Johnson, 97, finished with the rating. That one game against the Colts had 3 touchdowns, 1 interception that ended up getting signed by the Baltimore Ravens. So he did not finish this season out with us. On the ground, Michael Carter had finished with 14 games, 174 attempts, 639 yards, 4.3 in average. He had a 55-yard run, and he had 4 touchdowns on the ground with no fumbles listed. But he did have no listed fumbles. He did have a fumble that would end the game against the Patriots, I'm pretty sure. But anyways, Tevin Coleman with 11 games had 84 attempts, 356 yards, 4.2 in average. He had no touchdowns. Now, it felt like his season was a bit of a disappointment. I mean, he really couldn't get really into the end zone, and he would only break off for maybe 1 or 2 decent runs every game. Now, Ty Johnson, 16 games, 61 attempts, 238 yards, 3.9 in average, and 2 touchdowns. It also had 1 fumble against the Darius Leonard punch-out. I don't think Ty Johnson will be retained this year, unfortunately. Didn't have a solid year on the ground. Zack Wilson had 1 game where he had 91 yards on the ground, as well as 4 total touchdowns on the ground. Austin Walter with a touchdown, Elijah Moore with a touchdown, and Braxton Berrios with 2 touchdowns on the ground. We finished with 1,667 yards, 4.4 in average, and 14 touchdowns on the ground, as well as 9 fumbles. 9 fumbles, but only 1 of them listed, which I don't think is right. Going back up here, 59% completion percentage, 3,959 yards, and 20 total touchdowns, 20 total interceptions. Receiving, Elijah Moore only had 11 games, and he started at 10 of them. He had the most targets on the team with 43 receptions, 538 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Corey Davis, his season ended early, 9 games played, 34 receptions, 492 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Those all came in within his first 4 games. Keelan Cole, likely not to be re-signed again, 15 total games, 28 receptions, 449 yards, and 1 touchdown. Jamison Crowder, I don't think should be re-signed either. 12 games, 51 receptions, 447 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Braxton Berrios hopefully will be re-signed compared to those guys. 46 receptions, 0 drops, 431 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Ty Johnson got 2 touchdowns in the air. Michael Carter had 325 yards. Ty Johnson with 372. So running backs got involved in the backfield. Tight ends were kind of a non-factor this game. Ryan Griffin, 261 on 14 games. Tyler Kroft, likely not to be re-signed. 9 games, 173 yards, and they combined for 3 touchdowns. And then Connor McDermott with that last touchdown. One important thing to know is that Denzel Mims finished with 8 receptions and 133 yards. Likely, Denzel Mims should be gone after this year or not retained or traded. I could care less. He's not meshing well with Zack Wilson. He can't get open. He's a penalty causer. Hopefully, we'll find a new home for him. Our leading catcher was Jamison Crowder. Our leading yards, of course, was Elijah Moore. And Elijah Moore also had the most amount of touchdowns. One key fact to know here is that rookies led in, I'm pretty sure, all important stats for position players, offensive position players. Zack Wilson, leader in yards, leader in touchdowns. Michael Carter was the leader in attempts and yards and touchdowns on the ground, as well as Zack Wilson. And then Elijah Moore was the leader in yards and was the leader in targets as well, and was the leader in receiving touchdowns. Now, going on to the defense, C.J. Mosley finished with 104 solo tackles, 168 total tackles, finished 4th in the NFL with that. Quincy Williams with 110 total tackles. Bryce Hall and Michael Carter are next to, and as well as Brandon Echols. Having 3 secondary players in your top 5 for tackles isn't a good sign. It means that you're letting up a lot of catches in the secondary. But moving on to the sack numbers, Quentin Williams, John Franklin Myers both finished with 6 sacks on 16 games played. I felt like John Franklin Myers wasn't as effective due to not only Carl Lawson being out, but we ended up having no depth in the end of the year because Bryce Huff went on IR, and we didn't have many edge rushers outside of them. But John Franklin Myers did get a contract extension, so he will be back. Quentin Williams on the interior pressure only got 6 sacks, which is good, but I felt like it could have been a lot better. Sheldon Rankins had quite a bad year, finished with 3 sacks. Did not do as well as we thought he hopefully would, and he's getting paid $9 million essentially to put up 3 sacks, which is not worth it. Quincy Williams had an amazing year with us, and as linebacker depth, I would strongly like for him to come back next year because he played awesome. C.J. Mosley, in his first year back off of that huge contract he signed, finished with 2 sacks. And then we had sacks sprinkled across the board. Michael Carter had 1 sack. Now for tackles for loss, Quincy Williams with 9 tackles for loss. He was our hard hitter there, and he didn't allow a lot of yards after contact as well. When he hit you, you're probably going to fall down. Quinton Williams at 2 with 7. John Franklin Myers with 6. Foley Fudikasi with 5. Who is Foley Fudikasi said that he was going to test free agency, so we'll have to see what happens with that. Shaq Lawson with 5, Sheldon Rankins with 5. Now, pass deflections. Bryce Hall finished with 16 pass deflections, top 10 in the NFL, I'm pretty sure. I think 6th in pass deflections. Brandon Echols finished with 8 pass deflections. Michael Carter II, who was excellent this year, with 5. Quincy Williams with 5. And then you have them. Interceptions. Ashton Davis finished with 2 interceptions and 18 total yards from that. Brandon Echols, 2 interceptions as well, 50 yards, and he did have a pick 6. Shaq Lawson in that Cincinnati game had an interception. Sherrod Niesman with an interception. John Franklin Myers also with an interception. And then, of course, the pick 6 from Brandon Echols. Forced fumbles. Quincy Williams finished with 3, Ashton Davis with 3, Jason Pinnock with 2, C.J. Mosley with 2, George Fant had 1, Jabari Zuniga had 1, and John Franklin Myers also had 1. And the leaders in recoveries were Sheldon Rankins and Michael. Moving on to scoring, Matt Amendola had the most points. Elijah Moore and Eddie Pinheiro finished in 2nd and 3rd. So Elijah Moore and also Braxton Berrios finished with 30. So Braxton Berrios and Elijah Moore were our most valuable players to score points. Of course, Braxton Berrios had that help on his return touchdown. Zack Wilson finished with 26. Ty Johnson and Michael Carter both with 24, as well as Corey Davis. Now, returning stats. Braxton Berrios was absolutely excellent. He finished first in attempts, or he actually finished first in average yards for kickoffs. And then he also had that 102-yard returning touchdown. Absolutely excellent. And Tevin Coleman also had a good year returning. He had a 65-yard return touchdown, 28.8 average as well. On punts, Braxton Berrios averaged 13.4, with the longest being 28 and no touchdowns. Kicking, Eddie Pinheiro finished a perfect 8 for 8 on the year. I hope that he returns. He also went 9 for 10 with extra points. Matt Amendola ended up just missing too many kicks at the end of the day. 68% field goal isn't very solid. And he ended up getting released, and he's on the practice squad now. And then punting, Thomas Morstead in the beginning of the year was solid with 48.2, and he had 7 inside the 20. But Braden Mann later in the year started to get better, finished with the most punt yards and 45.7 average and 14 inside the 20. To go over the team stats, for the offensive rankings, we finished 26th in total offensive yards, 27th in rushing yards, 20th in passing yards, and 28th in total points. Just only one step up from last year. For the defense, we finished 32nd in total yards allowed, 30th in passing yards allowed, 20th in rushing yards allowed, and then 22nd in total points allowed with 504 points. Just the defense was unacceptable this year. They took a major step back, and we thought that Robert Saleh was hopefully going to improve the defense. But unfortunately, injuries to our best players caused us to have a terrible year on defense. Moving on to special teams and turnover rankings, we finished first in kickoff yards and first in kickoff averages due to Braxton Berrios just being a total beast and getting a 101-yard kick return touchdown that helped that a lot. In punt returns, we finished 21st in punt return yards, total yards, due to us fair catching it a lot. But we did finish second in punt return average. Braxton Berrios once again. For our turnover rankings, we finished once again negative 13 for the turnover differential, 30th in the league. We got 7 interceptions. We finished 30th in the league. We finished 23rd in fumbles which was 7. And then we finished 20th in total turnovers with 14. We threw 20 interceptions. That's the 31st in the NFL. We were 10th in the NFL with 7 lost fumbles. And then our turnovers on the offensive side was 28th with 27. Moving on to the player grades. I am giving the quarterback position a B-. I think Zack Wilson has a lot of potential, and Mike White had one of the best games of the year. We had 3 Rookie of the Week quarterback nominees, as Zack Wilson won 3, and then an AFC Player of the Week quarterback. Halfback, I'm going to give a B, just because I think Michael Carter had an excellent year. But at the same time, the rest of the position didn't have as good as a year as Michael Carter did. I think Tevin Coleman did well. But we did get a good amount of touchdowns on the ground with our running backs. Receiver, I'm going to give a C just because the depth isn't there. It's Braxton Berrios, it's Elijah Moore, and it's Corey Davis. Those are the only guys that are going to be really retained in this group, and drops were a massive issue for us this season. Offensive line, I'm going to give a B+. In the start of the year, it was really shaky, but if the starters were out there, if all the starters were out there, we would have a pretty solid pocket. And this is all without mentioning Mekhi Becton, who was out for the entire year with a knee injury. George Fant allowed 18 pressures the entire year. Elijah Vera Tucker allowed 1 sack the entire year. And Connor McGovern had a good year. And when we brought in LDT, the offensive line really seemed to gel. The tight end position was not good at all. I'm giving it a D. 3 touchdowns and around 400 yards in total. The tight ends were also inconsistent, also injury prone. Tight ends should be addressed in free agency or in the draft. Moving on to defense. Defensive tackle, I'm going to give a C+. Not a lot of pressure other than Quincy Williams, and it felt like Quincy Williams was really the only defensive tackle that even had a good year. Sheldon Rankins had a bad year. Foley Fodakasi had not a good year as well. Nathan Shepard didn't do much. Overall, a C+. Edge, I'm going to give a C- due to health concerns because Bryce Huff went on IR twice this year. John Franklin Myers, was most of his pressure was interior pass rush pressure. It wasn't that great off the edge, and Carl Lawson went down with an injury. I think the edge position could possibly still be in need in the draft, so that hopefully will be a focus. Linebacker, I'm going to give a B-. I think Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley bring the grade up a lot. CJ Mosley didn't have as good as a year as he started off in 2019. He finished with 0 picks, but he was one of the leading tacklers in the league. And then Quincy Williams was a guy that basically shot out of a cannon every play. I felt like his head wasn't on a swivel as much. He wasn't tracking for the ball. He was playing for the player most of the time, trying to hit them. Overall, a really good depth piece, and I hope they re-sign him. CB, I'm going to give a B, and I'm only giving them a B because they allowed a lot of passing yards. We were one of the worst in allowing passing yards in the air. I felt like a lot of that was to do with safety, but overall, Bryce Hall was a really good player this year. He was one of the lockdown defenders. It was one of the top players in forced incompletions this year. Did finish with 0 interceptions, and I think that Brandon Eccles is an excellent depth piece. I don't think he's good enough or has the potential to be CB2 or CB1, so I still think that CB1 could be addressed. But if you have something there with Bryce Hall, you could just roll with it. And also, Michael Carter is going to be the slot cornerback for the next 10 years. I think Michael Carter II is absolutely excellent. Now, with safeties, I'm giving them an F. I thought that they did absolutely atrocious. Even when Marcus May was healthy, he was not even having a good of a year as he did last year when we had nobody. And Ashton Davis is still not a good safety. I still don't think he's a starting safety in the NFL. And Sherrod Neesman was our backup. Elijah Riley. We had no safety depth, and the safeties that we actually had weren't even good. Now, at kick returner, we have to give Braxton Berrios an A+. He probably should be an all-pro returner. Hopefully he does that. Now, he finished first in kick return yards and first in kick return average with 30.4, which is absolutely excellent. He's an automatic A+ for me. Kicker is going to be a C. Matt Amendola was inconsistent the entire year. We brought in one kicker versus the Eagles. He shanked 2 extra points. But then we got Eddie Pinheiro, who finished 8 for 8 with field goals in the last couple of weeks. Hopefully he comes back next year and continues that streak. Punter, I'm going to give a B. I think Thomas Morstead was one of the better punters when he was with us, when Braden Mann got hurt. And then when Braden Mann came back, it was a little shaky to start off, but he ended up getting better and putting balls inside the 20 more often later in the year. And then log snapper, I'm going to give an A. Thomas Hennessy, we didn't really have a lot of bad snaps at all, or that I've seen. And overall, he just seems like a good long snapper to have. But that is going to do it for the 2021-2022 season recap, the final episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This was quite a process to make, and I hope you like, share, subscribe this video, and leave your feedback in the comments. More videos about the draft and free agency are incoming.